All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pod Isa. I am Isabela Castro, your host, and today we have a very special guest. Guess who? Maureen Bisognano, someone I have a truly and special admiration. Welcome, Maureen.
Oh, it's a delight to be with you, Isabella.
Oh, can you imagine it? I am super delighted. I'm reading for you a brief bio of Maureen. Maureen is the president emerita and senior fellow at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, where she previously served as a president and CEO for 5 years, following 15 years as executive vice president and COO. She is preeminent authority on improvement healthcare system, recognized by her election to the National Academy of Medicine. Ms. Bisognano advises healthcare leaders globally, frequently speaks at major healthcare conferences on quality improvement, and she is tireless advocate for change. She also serves as an instructor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and a research associate in the Brigham and Women's Hospital Division at Social Medicine and Health Inequalities. Before joining IHI, she was the CEO of the Massachusetts Respiratory Hospital and Senior Vice President of the Duran Institute. Welcome again, Marie. It's such an honor to have you today, and especially because you are such a leader and you are a female leader. And this is one of the topics we are exploring today. I'm so happy to have you. I was studying a little bit about you and I found a picture of you of 2016, I guess, maybe 17, in the first wave of IHI Specialista em Melhoria. It's the translation of Improvement Advisor, the first wave we had in Brazil with Paulo Boreng and Pedro Delgado, and you so graciously came to give like messages of encouragement for us. And I took a picture with you. I'm gonna share this with you later. We were younger, and oh wow, this is you. So let's start with a topic that always inspires us around the world: women leadership. You started your career in a very earlier time when few women were in leadership positions in healthcare. So, can you remember what motivated you to pursue this path?
Well, it's an interesting journey because I never set out to do a leadership role. I started my career as a nurse in the operating room. And I remember one day, one of the surgeons asked me to hand him an instrument, and I handed it to him. And he looked at it and he said, "This isn't the right one." It was a scalpel, and he threw it at me.
Oh, wow.
It just narrowly missed me. But I remember thinking, how does it feel right for someone to act that way? I had loved my job, but I said, this isn't for me. So the next day, I quit the operating room and I went to work in intensive care. And there, I loved taking care of patients and their families. It was a real joy. And again, I had no leadership aspirations because I loved the work I did every day. But it was a new wing of a hospital that I was working in. And every day, I would walk through the new pediatric unit, which had 14 beds, to get to the 14-bed intensive care unit. And the intensive care unit was completely full every day. Patients in the hallway, patients in the emergency department, and the 14-bed pediatric unit might have 2 patients in it. And so I was reading about setting up progressive care units. This is how old I am. And I went to the head nurse and I said to her, "Why don't we take over the pediatric unit and make it into a progressive unit to help us flow with the flow of patients?" And she said no. And so I said, after a couple of days of walking through the empty pediatric unit, I said, "Can I ask the supervisor?" And she said, "Sure." And so I went and asked the supervisor and she said no. And so I kept going up the chain until finally I went to the CEO of the hospital And I said, can we take over the this unit and pediatric unit and make it into a step down unit? And he started laughing at me and he said, if you can convince the pediatricians to move their patients back to the old part of the hospital, you can have that wing. And so I went to the pediatricians meeting and they say, get out of here. We're never going to give you that. But every month for 6 months, I went back to the pediatricians meeting and I learned that I needed to communicate to different people in different ways. So I learned to start with a story, and I told the story of a person who couldn't get into the intensive care unit, and I could see that I was reaching some of the pediatricians' hearts, but not all. And then after I told the story, I extrapolated, and I said, it's not just that person. This is how many other people are suffering from the same circumstances. And then I extrapolated, and I told them story, extrapolation, the human cost, what it's like when we have to send an ICU patient to another hospital and their family can't be with them. And then I did a financial analysis. And I learned that if you tell a story, you get to some hearts. If you extrapolate, you get to people's brains. If you tell the human cost, you get people to understand, and then the financial cost. And at the end of the 6 months, they gave me the unit. And it really gave me a sense of curiosity, looking out and seeing there are new ways to do things, and then how to bring it into a system that might not be open to change.
Yeah.
So that was my first lesson. And then I kept getting recognized in that system. And then when I was 34, I was invited to be the CEO of another hospital. And I was 34 and a woman and a nurse, which was completely unusual at that time. But I found that I had a different way to think and communicate and relate, and that really, really helped me as a successful CEO in that hospital.
Incredible. I see that your journey started with curiosity, but a genuine and super desire to change. You saw that,
Absolutely.
and you brought to the table conversations that were really necessary, like the human side of the change, the importance to bring people's stories to the table, and here you are today. See,
Yeah. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy being a woman leader back at that time.
I imagine.
A
Yeah.
funny story is I remember the first time I went to a CEO meeting, and I walked into this big fancy boardroom, and I was the only woman, of course, and I was 34 and a nurse. And I thought, this is really going to be a challenge to try and um, get accepted into this group. And when I walked in, a man turned around and he looked at me and he said, honey, get me a cup of coffee.
Oh no.
And I thought to myself, how should I deal with this? And I said, I'm happy to get you coffee. How do you take it? And he told me. And then I said, and this afternoon, when I want my coffee, you get it from me and I take it black. And then everybody started laughing. And I realized that separating myself through humor was going to be a stronger way than going in and getting angry or fighting for my rights. And so
Yeah.
it taught me an incredible lesson about having a voice.
Great, great, great point. Instead of fighting to get your, yeah, to find a place for you, give me a seat.
Yeah.
Yeah, give a seat. Make joke, making
Yeah.
joke things. Amazing. I love it. I love it. Maureen, do you recall a defining moment? Now, you just told us this one, but is there another one, a defining moment early in your journey that reinforced your purpose? Something that happened and you thought, wow, this is the purpose that I have. You realize that you were in the right track.
I think that my first day as the CEO was a defining moment. I was walking into a hospital that had never had a woman leader before and was very set in its ways. And I realized that that first day was going to make a difference. As a matter of fact, when people ask me advice when they're taking a new job now, the very first thing I say is plan your first day because everybody's going to be watching what you do and what you say and who you meet with, and everybody's looking at your calendar, and what you are speaking through your calendar is your priorities. So the very first day, I spent the whole day making rounds. I talked to patients. I sat at their bedside and asked me to tell me their stories, tell me about their families, what happened to them. I talked to staff. I sat down at lunch with nurses and had lunch and dinner. And I just think that it's very important to demonstrate your priorities through your actions and your words. And so the words I used, I was very cautious about being open and really telling people I wanted to hear. I do remember one day early in my career making rounds, and one of the LPNs looked at me and she went, "Oh no!" And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "You're wearing your red suit." She said, "Whenever leaders wear red, it's telling us that we have to cut our budget." That was just such a powerful moment for me to really hear from her that that's what they read what you wear. Uh, so I gave away my red suit, but
I've never heard that. I learned something new today as well. Incredible. As you were speaking, I remember when I first visited IHI headquarters. I was amazed. You know what really caught my attention was that the leaders' room, like your room, don't Barrett room, no doors,
yeah.
no doors at all. I just resumed this availability that you guys have to just share an idea with whoever shows up. Yeah.
And my first day when I went to work at IHI, Don Berwick and I had been teaching courses for some years, but then he asked me to come be the COO. And I remember I was going into IHI's old office and we were about to move, but the old office had very few traditional offices. And when I walked in, Don said, "Come in here." There was no space for me. So he had this big, beautiful desk and a computer, and next to it was a card table and a yellow legal pad, and that was my desk. And so we sat next to each other for a few months until we moved. Dawn is a pediatrician and a researcher, and I was a nurse and a CEO, but we were sitting next to each other. And so for those months, virtually every opportunity or issue that arose, we came at it from a totally different direction. But we brought both of our strengths and created something new. So when we moved into our first new office, it was a separate office. And the first day we said, "Take down the wall." And then we moved to a totally different office with 8 desks in our office. It was Dawn and me, and we had fellows and people from all over the world come and sit with us. And we said, this is how collaboration begins. Sitting together, sharing your strengths, listening to each other, and every single day respecting the knowledge that the other person brings.
I'll teach, I'll learn.
Yeah, all teach, all learn.
Woo! Well, after these great lessons, powerful lessons, let's shift to another point that I am a super fan. It's the What Matters to You movement. The What Matters to You movement has spread worldwide, impacting thousands of professionals and patients. And I know that you are a super fan too, and one of the first starters. How did this idea originates for the ones who doesn't know yet, and how this idea originate, and when did you realize that this simple question could become this big and transform healthcare worldwide as it does?
Well, it happened when I was flying from Boston to Paris for one of the IHI British Medical Journal forums. And I was on the plane, a red eye, and I was reviewing my plenary talk. And then I happened to pick up a New England Journal of Medicine issue, and I read an article in there by Susan Edgman Levitan and Michael Barry from Mass General. And in the article, it said, we can't only ask what's the matter, we have to ask what matters to you. And I kept reading that sentence on the plane over and over. And it resonated so much with me. I ripped up my plenary talk and I totally rewrote it on the plane. When I got to Paris, there were about 4,000 people. And I said, when you go back to work, don't ask the next patient you see what's the matter, ask what matters to them. Within a week, I started getting stories in different languages from all over the world. When people said, when I asked that question, it changed everything. I got an email from Scotland from a young pediatric nurse who said she walked into her next patient's room and it was a young girl named Kendra who was severely autistic and had never spoken. So the nurse, Jen Rogers, said, well, make a poster for me and draw pictures of what matters to you. She was 11. That poster changed everything because it told who Kendra was. And the doctors and nurses said that the way Kendra says hi, she pulls your hair. And if you try and give her a medication, she'll jump out of bed and run. And they said without that poster, we would have restrained her and sedated her, but we knew who she was, and it changed everything. So the stories started coming in from everywhere. And as they did, I began to think maybe there's something here. So we started having a phone call once a month and telling the stories. And it's been 10 years now, and we still have the phone calls once a month. And people from all over the world are talking about how looking at the human side of healthcare, asking what matters in addition to what's the matter, is changing everything. And research is now showing that about 60 to 70% of the time, when someone, a doctor, a nurse, a technician, a therapist, a dentist asks what matters to you, they find out something new about this person that they never knew. And 70 to 80% of the time, they change their plan of care. So it really is transforming the way that we think and work together. And I'm so happy about this.
Yeah, I'm happy too. And 70 to 80% is a super high number. It really transforms. It's a radical transformation in decision making. It's a super participation of the patient in care, is in their own journey of care. In your opinion, if there is a challenge for us, for this movement nowadays, if there is a challenge in getting professionals on board and truly embrace this approach in their daily practice, what would it be? Do you think it's the profile, it's the system, it's the geography? Is there any?
If there's one thing I could say, I think it's that right now, especially after COVID, the staff are so burned out. And they tell me that they're afraid if they ask this question, that the patient or the family are going to ask for something that they can't do. So we started putting up a little matrix on walls around the world that said, ask the question, and then was this easy to do or a little bit more challenging? Could you do it alone or you needed help? Did it require a system change? And we found that the vast majority of asks were very small things that anybody could do. But we had to give the staff, I think, a sense of courage to try. I remember in Norway, a nurse was coming on to care for patients in her nursing home. And she asked the caregiver who was on the night shift last night, did anything make you smile? And the person taking care of the patient said, I took care of this man who nobody wanted to take care of. He was violent. He screamed and swore. He wouldn't let anybody near him. But she said when she walked in to the room to bathe him in the morning, she said, what would make today a good day for you? What matters to you today? And he said, I want to wear my blue shirt. And she said, why? And he said, it was my wife's favorite shirt, and she died 2 years ago today. And the whole time she bathed him, he was telling her stories. This is how we met. This is what our married life was like, how much they traveled together and their kids. And at the end of the bath, which nobody ever wanted to do because of his violence, he said, would you put me in my wheelchair? I want to go out and talk to all the other patients about my wife. He had never communicated with other patients, but it changed everything. to ask that simple question. And so it's just telling people, try it, try it.
It's amazing what this simple question can do, isn't it? Well, I just love it. We should have another podcast just to talk about it. So let me shift to. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's shift to. I think the dogs agree too. It, it's no. It's also everybody amazed with the what matters to you movement. So let's shift and have a quick talk about your IHI journey and any special projects that you may have.
Oh,
Uh,
go ahead.
uh, you now at this point of your career, you've led incredible transformations at IHI. So looking back, if you think of key milestones or projects that you are most proud of.
Hmm. A couple come to mind. The first one is I remember Dawn and I were always teaching quality improvement, and we were at one of our forums. And one time we looked out there and we said, "Look at all the people. It seems like we're getting to some of the group, but not all, and not everybody can come to the forum." And so we asked a group of the youngest people, medical students, nursing students, dental students. We said, "We're going to buy you lunch. And after lunch, we're going to come and meet with you. And we'd love to hear from you how you want to learn." And so we came back after lunch and they said, "We want to learn online," which Dawn and I were too old to ever think about. And so we got together with them and we founded the Open School, which was a free online way for students and faculty all around the world to learn about quality improvement. And it spread like crazy. None of us would have ever thought of this without them. So I was really proud to see how quickly that could spread and really make a difference in so many people's lives. Another one was I remember coming home from Europe one day, and I was fascinated in Europe to see that a lot of the work that we had been doing in IHI, like safety bundles and decreasing urinary tract infections and central line infections, was spreading much more quickly across the continent of Europe than it was in the US. And we were sitting there and frustrated again. And so we decided to check out with our kids. My son was running President Obama's campaign, and Don Berwick's son was running a different campaign. And we called our kids and we said, "We want to make a big difference in the world. How should we do that?" And they said, "Well, what do you want to do?" We said, "Oh, we want to improve safety." And they said, "Well, when?" And we said, "Soon." And they said, "Some is not a number and soon is not a time." And so we have that on the wall of IHI.
Yeah.
They said you have to set a date and you have to pick a number. So we picked 100,000 lives we wanted to save in 18 months. And we started the 100,000 Lives campaign. We hired a young kid who had never worked in healthcare, and he totally transformed healthcare across the country. I remember him coming to me and saying, "I need to buy a bus." And I said, "I'm asking you to improve safety in hospitals." He said, "I need a bus." So I rented a bus for him, totally shrink wrapped it in 100,000 lives. And these young people took off across the country and went and visited hospitals, boardrooms, physician offices. And we gave them 18 months and they saved 122,000 lives. And it was just incredible, something that we never would have done. And then pursuing perfection was another thing I'm really proud of. We just came up with this idea that there were innovators out there that wanted to be working together. So we put out an application and said, if anybody wants to dive deeply into transforming their health system, put in an application. We got a little grant to fund it, and we got 240 applications in less than a month, and we picked 7. And those hospitals are the absolute leaders of healthcare across the country still today. But I guess the lesson that I'm proudest of at IHI is trust the young. that really, if the young people have a different perspective, and it just fills my heart when I sit in a room with young people and say, how can we reach 100,000 people? Or how can we get 1 million students to take courses? And they have all the answers. It's a matter of just sitting and partnering with the young.
Yeah, and they are the future.
Yes.
And sometimes I keep wondering this about dentistry, especially. And when someday I'm gonna die, then who is gonna keep my work on?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to
You,
keep the movement going.
yeah, you do need to worry about that.
Yeah, lovely.
They want you to stay around for another 50 years, but you do have to worry about that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we are coming to a close. I think you might have heard a million of times how inspiring your work is, and leadership in transformation about vision and resilience. I think should be our closing message. Do you have any advice you would like to give to emerging leaders here in Brazil in healthcare who want to create, who are in a moment of change, to our fellow community, to our specialistas in melhoria community, people who are engaged in any groups of change here in Brazil? Is there any message that comes from your heart, with your experience and from your moment of your career, you would like to share today?
Well, I would say there's 3 things that I always recommend that people build into their daily week, their days and the weeks. That's work on your IQ, your EQ, and your CQ. IQ. We have to keep learning. The knowledge is coming at us endlessly and quickly. And so you can't think that as a leader, well, I know it all because I graduated, I got my degree. It's constant learning. So I would say every Sunday night when you're sitting after dinner, plan your IQ for the week. What articles are you going to read? What podcasts are you going to listen to? What courses are you going to take online? But you've got to constantly be learning. The second is EQ, the emotional quotient or empathy. And I think it's critical that we keep working on that as well. When COVID hit, as an example, it was a sense of isolation, and a lot of people are still feeling that. When COVID hit, I pulled out my Christmas card list. I'm the oldest of 9 kids, a big Irish family, so I have a huge Christmas card list. There's 250 people on that. But I made a separate list of all the people on my list who lived alone, and I called it my reach list. And every day since COVID started, 5 years, I have reached out to one person at least on that list. I might send a written card, or I might call, or I might send a text, or I might send a picture. But what happens with empathy is that you see someone else's pain, but what happens with compassion is that you take an action on it. Empathy means you feel bad because you see someone living in isolation, but compassion and kindness means that you get to feel good too because you see that you've had an impact on another person. And certainly in healthcare today, it can be reaching out to one of your coworkers or a staff member who's challenged. But our reach list, I think, is critical. And then CQ is your curiosity quotient. I learned so much by going outside healthcare and just being curious. I remember walking into a supermarket, and there was a big sign on the door, and it said, "You will never have to wait more than one person ahead of you in the checkout line." And I was thinking about emergency rooms all being filled and waiting rooms in doctor's offices. And so, of course, I used my CQ. I went back and found the manager, and I said, "How do you make that promise?" And he showed me all the data he looked at every day, all the methods and processes he used. But he reliably kept that promise because, 1, he knew it was important to people, and 2, he knew that he had the capability to fix it if he wanted to. But it's those kind of things, I think, that when you get curious about them, we can learn lessons from other healthcare systems, harvest ideas, go visit. If you're in another city or country, stop into the hospital and just take a look around. You will learn so much when you start working on your CQ.
Lovely, lovely. What an incredible message. I'm still amazed with the conversation we had today. And as we wrap up this inspiring conversation, we reflect on the challenges and triumphs of female leadership and the resilience required to break barriers and the power of a woman in transforming not healthcare but also the world. The journey is not always easy, but it's through courage, collaboration, and the unwavering determination that we create lasting change. Thank you so much, Maureen, for sharing the message today, for your example, and for being this such inspiration for all of us. And thank you for listening for one more episode. And most importantly, keep believing, keep leading, and keep making a difference. Thank you so much for your audience, and see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.